Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Fifth Disciplines Show. If you're new to our channel, we cover everything to do with people, brand, and systems. And our content is geared towards enabling African climate change players to scale. So remember to subscribe or follow us on LinkedIn for the latest news and updates. In today's show, we have a very special guest, Candice Seggie. She is the Chief People Officer of Solar Africa. Thank you, Candice, so much for joining our show today. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me.
A super chat to have you share some of your insights with our listeners. I think you're going to be adding a lot of value to the companies that are listening and wanting to scale. But before we get into the nitty-gritty with all the questions, tell us a bit about your personal journey and your career journey.
Thanks, Lindy. Yes, so I have traveled between the UK and South Africa extensively through my youth and all the way through my career, and really started out in the recruitment side of things in London, moved around, had my own businesses in various industries, came back to South Africa when I had my children. I specialized as a digital marketing consultant, had some great and very diverse clients, and then joined Solar Africa more from a digital marketing side. Moved into a general management role there. I'm very operational, having had my own businesses. How a company runs is very, very important to me, and always have the soft spot for people. Coming from the recruitment days, it's all about people. That's how companies succeed. And so I've then transitioned more onto setting up the original human capital team, which has evolved into our people operations team. And that's where I currently sit.
Fabulous. And for all our listeners who don't know much about Solar Africa, maybe you can give us a little bit of background on who Solar Africa is, but also tell us a bit more about this Electricity 2.0 and its virtual power solutions and what that specifically means for your team.
Wonderful. So Solar Africa is a renewable energy company. We help businesses transition to cleaner, more cost-effective power. We've built a very strong track record in delivering on-site solar and energy solutions, so ultimately reducing costs for customers, carbon, and as well as complexity. And today we're expanding that even further, evolving from a solar provider to a full energy partner. So it's always about choice and flexibility for our customers. Electricity 2.0 is just a natural evolution for us. So that's working with virtual power solutions. You might have heard of something called wheeling. That's where we generate renewable energy on one of our solar farms, and then we deliver it via the grid. And then there's energy trading. So that's where we help businesses source clean power from multiple different producers. And that's all to create their ideal energy mix and, again, savings. So it's about choice. What it means for our team is that while these solutions keep evolving, we need to as well, and quickly.
That's amazing. I'm sure that finding skills in such a new market or technology per se, I suppose, can definitely come with its challenges, but we can definitely dive into that in a bit more detail. Obviously, Solar Africa was founded in about 2011, if I'm not mistaken, now and originally as a solar rooftop provider. As you've said, you've emerged or evolved rather over the years, and the staff count, I think, is at about 140 employees. Then in 2022, you had a merger with Starsight Energy, and that employee count went to over 300 staff. Can you tell us a bit more about this journey? How did you prepare the staff for the news of the merger, and what did this process look like? And what were some of the key takeaways that you sort of learned from that process?
It was a really exciting journey, actually. I was really privileged to be part of something as huge as that. So equipping the team for a merger, having never been through a merger myself, was a really big deal. So ultimately, it started at the top with understanding that this would require a lot of change management. We had a lot of time to prepare for that. So we went and upskilled in terms of what is change management, how to effectively merge. We were very fortunate that this merger was a positive move. There were no redundancies or any kind of negative connotations, but people don't generally like change. So it was all about navigating that. So what we did is we adopted a project name. We got very excited about it. We built up a lot of momentum. We used John Cotter's 8 steps, and that really did help. So we built up that urgency. We got a lot of people involved in it. And we painted the vision. We gave it, as I mentioned, a great project name and explained all the positives from it, as well as the cons. So ultimately, to get that change, you either have to have something that is so positive and so exciting that people want it, or things are so terrible. And things weren't terrible. We have a wonderful company. And so it was all about selling the pros. So we did a lot in terms of talking to the teams. We had monthly meetings. We put posters around the office, introducing who the new faces were, and again, reiterating the message of growth. And that's what it ultimately is about helping more customers. And the merger was a positive step towards being able to do that.
That's amazing. And also on that aspect of communication, there's often this fine line between giving enough information to staff to build trust and provide that
Mm.
clarity. But then on the other side of it, you've also got that it can be counteractive where maybe too much information creates uncertainty and maybe disengagement. What did you find from the staff's perspectives were some of the biggest areas of concern and maybe some of the areas that they were most excited about when it comes to this merger that you had? And what would you advise companies that are going through a similar situation to address early on from a communication perspective? You've also spoken about, the vision and things like that, but from a practical standpoint, can you give a few more insights?
Sure. I mean, you're never going to please everybody when it comes to the communication, too much or too little, explaining it where you think you've explained it really well, and then only to find out later that you haven't. So it is really, really important that you get your leadership team involved and people in different areas of the business and explaining it to them in a more practical way. So from the bottom up, from the bottom up and the top down, it's really important that everybody is aligned. So have your champions, get them to understand the why. That's always really, really important. There's always a good reason for these things. What people were most excited about was, again, just having more Africa exposure, learning more what was happening in the rest of the continent, which is always exciting for us. It's something we struggled with as a business prior to the mergers, to being able to really be impactful in different African countries. So it was really getting to know people. We were actually paired also with people in similar roles and departments in different countries. So we'd have meet and greets, which was great. And I think the teams did enjoy that element of it, that exposure. So ultimately, you can never communicate enough in these situations. I know we say maybe too much information. We had business as usual. It didn't stop. We didn't stop just to merge. So we had all of our day to day. So we just built the communication into our natural rhythms, and we never skirted away from answering if we didn't know. Simply, we don't know. And I think that is very, very important. If you're not sure what the change is going to be or how it's going to impact, just be honest and say, we don't know that right now. We'll get back to you. And I think that builds a lot of trust.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think a lot of companies sometimes get that wrong where they feel like they need to have the answers, or they give answers and then it changes. And then the staff are like, hey, what on earth's going on here?
Exactly.
But you also mentioned that you'd put up posters and things like that and then had the meetings. But from a cadence perspective, how would you recommend companies, like how often does that communication flow happen? Is there some sort of recipe to success on that communication flow?
I can only speak from our experience. I feel that ours went very well. It was a long process. So ultimately, in the beginning, when we started doing all the due diligence, there were a lot of staff members involved before other people even knew what was going on. So it was managing that. I think monthly, especially if it's a longer journey, which they often are, monthly is sufficient. And then you're always having chats with your team in between. So if anything is changing or there's more increase in maybe meetings or meet and greets or information sharing, might need to do a little bit more often. But for us, it was a monthly basis. And then right up until the point it got really exciting, we were planning celebrations. We had cupcakes, we had champagne, and we did a countdown, and we got everybody really excited. So it increased the closer we got to the big day. But ultimately, business as usual, and build it into natural meeting rhythms so it doesn't feel forced. I think that was a good point for us.
Yeah, I think that's also a good idea because often, I mean, you guys had a really positive experience, but I think maybe for other companies where there might be uncertainty, if they see these meetings popping in, randomly, they start to get a little bit nervous
Yes.
and anxiety kicks in and things like that. So, Candice, one of the other things I want to chat to you about is rapidly scaling a business. I know that brand and culture is really, really important to you, and you guys have been through processes of rapidly scaling. What advice do you have for companies? I mean, when you need to hire a large majority of staff, how do you ensure that you still keep that brand essence and culture and you don't lose that just to get the skills into, deliver on what's
Yeah.
needed? It's quite a fine line. Do you have any recommendations on strategies that companies should incorporate to balance that and make sure that culture is still lived?
I think this is my most exciting topic, actually, because when I joined Solar Africa, we were a team of 14. We're over 140. Next year, we'll be 180. And our
Holy
focus has been on scale, and it is incredible. But it's so important, as you mentioned, about the culture. So if you have a culture worth protecting, you will protect it. You'll find the ways to do that. And so we have had to change the way we operate as a business. One of the operating systems that we adopted very early on in the business was called the entrepreneurial operating systems, the way that you run the business on a day-to-day basis. And we realized when we got to 70 or 80 staff that while some of the concepts were really good, or the ideas were brilliant, and the rhythms were fantastic, it wasn't scaling with our teams. So we had
Mm,
to look into a different way to operate. And that's when we adopted the scaling up Fern Harnish kind of methodology there. And whilst doing that, everything starts with people. Everything starts with people. And so it was fantastic saying we have something worth protecting. We have 5 core values. Those are non-negotiable. We have an excellent brand. That's a non-negotiable. So we kept that and we were like, how do we protect this? We have culture champions. We have a really proven method for recruiting. And that hasn't changed, even though we do have to recruit more quickly. We do have to bring on more staff and more complicated roles. The
mm,
foundation hasn't actually changed on the cultural interviews we do or the way that we recruit. We've just refined it and we know exactly what we're looking for. And that's made it easier. So I think the scaling part of this journey is just the most exciting. And it was something I was terrified for, to be clear. I said, when the team gets to 30 or 35, I'm out, I'm done. I'll never be able to help you scale this business. And it has been the most amazing journey. So as long as you start with your team, you've got something worth protecting, you know what your values are, you know what the company
yeah.
stands for, that doesn't have to change. Just how your day to day, maybe your meetings, your rhythms, how that you operate, that can change. But keep the core. And that for us, it's definitely been worth protecting. So we haven't
Yeah.
changed that at all.
And what are your core values and how did you define them?
So defining them was the first start. We luckily had a lot of guidance from the entrepreneurial operating system as to how you do that. You have offsites, you feature it around key people that and behaviors that you already see in your business that you love. And you don't try and make them aspirational. You don't say we want to be a family-friendly business, so we're going to say that that's really important, but your behaviors don't match that. So making sure that they were practical and based on behaviors we could see within team members and that we were living every day. It's really difficult to get that right. It took us about 6 months. It took us another 6 months to slowly drip feed them into the business. Luckily, we have a fantastic marketing guru, Bianca, who could wordsmith what we were trying to say in a much more eloquent way than we could. And
Yeah.
eventually we went to the company with 5. So we are passionate and proud of what we do. We communicate candidly, especially when it is difficult. We take
Mm.
initiative, share our mistakes, and grow together. We are dependable and take accountability. And no one person is bigger than the solution. No egos. And from that, we've developed behavior statements to say, well, what does that look like out loud? If you were to walk into Solar Africa, what behaviors would you see? When we're doing our reviews, what does it look like here at Solar Africa? And we've had to get quite prescriptive with that over the years to ensure that there's no nuance there.
That's really interesting because always, I love talking about this because anything to do with culture, it's such a soft metric, and it's kind of like you've got to pull all this data from your
Mm.
employees and then try formulate this persona of this company. So I'm amazed, and I can understand why it took 6 months to develop it.
Yeah. And those are the things that are just a non-negotiable. I think,
Mm,
many things would be negotiable as your business scales and grows. But if you have these values that are definitely worth protecting and you can verbalize them and you can score yourself against them, they become really
yeah.
tangible. They become very evident. It's just the way we are as a business. And people feel that the minute they walk into the company.
And I suppose they also start living it more because they are more self-aware of it, especially when you're putting those values first and communicating that to the staff and the new hires. This is who we are and
Yes.
this is how we act and how we do things. But also, so quote unquote, Solar Africa is a progressive company that values culture and skill equally as important attributes. So this goes into my next question and sort of what we've been talking about here. How do you sort of keep nurturing that culture in the day-to-day operations, engagements between staff and the communications? Like from a practical standpoint, how do you make sure that that culture's lived?
Yeah, I mean, culture, as you mentioned earlier, can be quite fluffy. Everyone's got a different version of what culture is. For me, it's quite simply the behavior that you're willing to tolerate. So ultimately, how are things getting done? How do you behave? What gets rewarded? What is tolerated? What is not tolerated? All those behaviors, it's all about behavior. And for us, because we've been very, very clear on what our core values are and what those behaviors look like, it's very easy to see when it is working and when it isn't. We work with our leaders, we work with all of our managers, we do a lot of training with them. We do training on how to conduct performance reviews, how to spot certain behaviors. We actually have KPIs that include giving people feedback a certain number of times a year, whether that's constructive or positive. So it's all about making sure that we also walking the talk.
Yeah.
So it is important for us that we model that behavior too. Everybody models that behavior. And nobody's above being called out if you're not. In fact, we encourage it we communicate candidly, especially when it's difficult. That's saying those hard things. So if I am not behaving in a way that is representative of the brand or what we believe in, I expect to be called out in that behavior, and we expect to call others out in it. Equally, you have to celebrate. So that is a huge part of what we do. We have a lot of Slack groups celebrating. We love to ring bells and applaud people and get little gifts and celebrate all the little things, because that behavior is what we want to see. And when we say it is equally as important as skill, we also remunerate around our incentive schemes that 50% of your earning is around your behavior, and the other 50% is around your skills and how well you're doing at your role. So that's also how we make sure that it follows all the way through. It's not just words.
That's amazing. And I think what you've sort of also mentioned there around incorporating it obviously into those day-to-day actions, but around those job performance, the performance reviews, because that is instilling it, and it's always about building healthy habits, and building healthy habits means developing those behaviors in a way you want to see them play out.
Absolutely.
And then Candice, so we've spoken about matching or equally valuing culture to skill for Solar Africa. But from a hiring perspective, I can imagine that's quite hard to instill, because how do you assess or evaluate culture, which is soft, equal to the technical skill of someone? How does that play out, and what does that really mean?
Okay, that's a great question, actually, because a lot of people are confused how we can do that. Ultimately, we have a typical screening process. We're looking at CVs, we're screening with the introductory calls just to get all the basics. But then we go into our interview and recruitment stage, which is actually twofold. We have a technical interview, and that is where we have the two subject matter experts, usually the head of department or the line manager, and the questions are focused on the ability to do the job and examples around how you've demonstrated that you've done that before. And that's a really, really important stage of the interview, because now we're ticking, are they capable? Can they do it? Are they the best at what they do? Are they in their top 10 to 15%, which comes back to our top grading methodology, and it's all part of scaling up. But are they the top 10 to 15% of what we're looking for? And that can only be answered by subject matter experts. And then what we do is we have a cultural interview. And some people don't take this as seriously as the first interview. They let themselves down here, but this is equally as important as the first. So you might have the best engineer. Now we want to make sure, is that person going to fit into South Africa? Are they going to add the value that we want? And are they going to behave in the way we expect and bring their own little bit of uniqueness too? So we're not looking for cookie cutter, everybody must be the same. We want to celebrate, and we do celebrate diversity, but building on the core values of those behaviors. So what we do is we have a cultural interview that is always done by a people person, someone in my team, and a culture champion, and it's scripted, and it's around breaking down every single one of our core values and behaviors and asking questions around that. And we have scoring in that too. So at the end, there are scores, and we give feedback, and somebody has to pass both to be eligible to be hired. If they get to the stage of the core value interview, and believe me, the cultural interviews don't always go very well, we will not put that person through, even if they are the best at what they do, because they have flags. We're always looking to see if there are any red flags. So that's how we make sure that when we're recruiting, we are staying true to ourselves. We also make sure, like through the culture champions, it's not just me that has the say, or it's not just the people team. We want our culture champs to learn, and which they have done beautifully, how to interview, how to spot those behaviors, what to look for, and their voice counts. So immediately, by the time somebody joins our team, they've already met at a minimum 5 people from Solar Africa and have a really good feel for who we are and what we stand stand for. And generally people say it's a very, very, very enjoyable recruitment process due to being so thorough. But they're very proud when they walk in through the door because they got through all of that and they were the one that did that, you know? So we put them through it, but it's always really, really proud moment when we have our new joiners start. We can't wait to celebrate them.
That's brilliant. And I think also from that perspective, it's so important to get it right from the onset, because if you do start employing people that don't mirror the culture, but obviously you
Yeah.
also want them to be able to do the job, but it does start to erode culture over time, and it has ramifications on the rest of the team. So I love that you guys take it so seriously. And I'm sure also, like you say, from the candidate's perspective, it's super exciting for them to actually come into a company and feel that they belong there, and be able to get on with the team, which is absolutely fantastic. And I think also, I mean, maybe you've got some views on this, is a lot of candidates are maybe a little bit scared to, say something that's going to not get them that job. But at the end of the day, if they're not a good fit, they should be quite grateful that they, don't join the wrong.
Absolutely. We encourage them. We always say during the interview process that if you've read our core values and they seem a bit fluffy and cute and maybe a little bit aspirational for you, and you're sure that's okay, it's fine, it's nothing offensive by them, please, please, please don't continue with the interview. Please don't come and work here. You'll really, really not enjoy working at Solar Africa if you don't feel those core values, if you don't identify with them, if they're not shared in your family and the way you are personally, because we are really not just talking. We do walk the walk here. We are very thorough with these values and we live them every day. So if somebody comes in and we've had it where yeah, that's fine with me, no problem. And they join and it's just not a good fit. We know from day one. They know from day one.
That's awesome. And then Candice also, so I wanted to chat to you a little bit more about if there any metrics that you've seen that show up around. So you've mentioned obviously you've got this really strong branding perspective and
Uh-huh.
strategy that mirrors the culture or speaks to the culture. Have you found that the candidates that come through that branding channel, through the messages that you are sharing, have you found that their performance has been really effective or very impressive, as opposed to perhaps candidates that had come through another channel, or anything around those sort of elements of how branding
It
impacts
does
performance?
play a huge part. Yeah, the branding really does. I mean, we've had certain staff members that are with us now that have applied 4, 5, 6, or 7 times to actually get into Solar Africa, just knowing that the brand, what they see, what our staff put out there just really just resonates with them. And it just maybe hasn't been the right time or the right role for them specifically. Eventually they come through and we see huge success there. Ultimately, we do all of our own recruitment. It's very rare that we will go through an agency because we feel that we'd like to be in control of this recruitment process because we're so thorough, because it's all about the cultural fit too. And so we do measure the success of all the people that join. We measure our recruiting time to hire. We measure, again, the A player methodology is something that we use within the company, and how many new people joined in our A players within the first 6 months. So again, I wouldn't say it's always been that when they come to us directly or because they've seen us on LinkedIn that they're going to be amazingly brilliant. We find great talent always, but they just identify and engage with the brand online, and with us, those values just shine through.
That's awesome. I think it's some definite takeaways for the listeners is, make sure that that branding is on point, because there are some really positive outcomes that come from it.
Yes, and it must be accurate, not inspirational, please, because people see through that. They just want to know that you are who you say you are. They want to be able to contact your staff members on LinkedIn and ask them directly, is this place really for real? Is it really like that? Is that how you experience it? And we encourage that because we've got nothing to hide. We are very authentic in that sense. And I think for any companies out there to make sure that your LinkedIn, just like you can have a fancy website, make sure that it's true, make sure that it's real, because people will check and they should be checking to make sure that
Yeah.
it is what they're expecting. You want everybody to be on the same page. And I think that's important. You set that tone right and that you make sure that you are doing what you say you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think on that note of what you mentioned there, is being able to have your candidates speak to employees and say, is this actually it? I think that's fantastic, because a lot of companies sometimes might be a little bit scared for candidates to speak to the employees, but it really shows how strong your brand is and that
Yeah.
culture when you trust that you can allow that to happen and get the communication flow
It's going to
going.
happen anyway. So you may as well just do what you said you're going to do and be good to your teams and look after them because they're going to do it anyway. And I think people should be. You can't trust websites. I know in America they've got a lot of ratings on different websites. You can always see if it's an employee to work for, but it's best from the truth and the source, which is your own existing team members.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And Candice, so we've also touched on this whole element of behaviors and attitudes and living it. But from a performance management perspective, I mean, you've got years and years of experience. What have you found works to increase performance and recalibrate behaviors for staff at all levels when they're feeling disengaged? How do you reshape those behaviors, perceptions, and
Yeah, that it's a very, very big topic, and I could talk all day on it because I'm very passionate about this. For me, your performance management system is not a once a year review. It's not a twice a year review. Our performance management starts with weekly check-ins. It starts with monthly one-to-ones. Then we have quarterly reviews, and we have so many different areas of touch points during the week where we actually schedule to speak to our team for a minimum of 15 minutes per week. I have to speak one-on-one with my team. Why? Because you need to know where they're at personally and professionally and support them. Everybody has good quarters, everybody has bad quarters. So our systems are collecting data on a regular basis. And I think that's the best to get an overall performance of how somebody's doing. The questions that we ask, again, always start with the core values. That's a no-brainer. And then how somebody feels that they are doing. We ask people to rate themselves. We rate them. We ask them to rate their managers. And that communication should never be a surprise. For example, a performance review itself, it shouldn't be a surprise. Everything should be and have already been communicated. And so all of those touch points are important. We change one-to-one meeting agendas quite regularly to make sure that we're asking the right questions, that our managers are learning to care personally as well as professionally about somebody. If you've got a lot going on at home, which everybody does this year for our team, I mean, it's particularly been really quite hard, it is going to naturally impact the outcome at work. So making sure that people are aware with what people are going through individually, privately, and personally, as well as supporting professionally. And then we put a lot in place to support professionally. There's no point saying, oh, well, you were meant to score a 3, you scored a 2. Good luck with that. We want to work with them. We want to help them. We want to empower them. We need to give them the tools. We need to be really specific. And that's where the people operations team really does help support both the employee and the manager in building out performance improvement plans, working with specialists or coaches to really make sure we're giving everybody the best support we can for them to be the best at what they do. That's what we all want.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I like the aspect of the 360-degree communication that happens and touching base. One of the things I think that often happens at companies, it's a conversation which is a standalone, once-off engagement, but it's not a dialogue that continues and, to measure that to make sure that those improvements are happening.
Yeah, I
So,
think
so
software is
Candice,
important there as well.
yeah,
Sorry, I did forget to mention that actually, Lindy, because you can't be working off your personal opinion on somebody or what you think. It really does need to be documented, and you do need to have really good software that can help you make sure that those conversations are not just left in that review, which it could do. So we use a fantastic performance software, but we have growth areas. So while you're discussing something, you can actually add it as a growth area. So you're not forgetting about it, and individuals can take that as far as they want to personally in their own time, but also at work, we will then support with training and development afterwards. And it just does make a difference to have an actual system in place so that these
yeah.
conversations really are fruitful and they have the longevity and the outcome that you want.
Yeah, that's a really good point is, ensuring that it's not biased to maybe how you want to ask a question today or how you perceive that information, with this candidate or employee kind of things. I think that, like you said, having the system in place, making it measurable and objective is absolutely key. Do you think that more companies should adopt, software to help them do that? Or have you got any suggestions for them on what to use and how to go about maybe getting it set up and what's important to start on first?
Yeah, I mean, it does all come down to budget and resources. Do you actually have the budget to do this? Do you have somebody who's going to set it up and be able to measure it and manage it and get it going? We started very small with the entrepreneurial operating system. It was an A4 piece of paper that we broke into different sections, and we would simply write on our piece of paper. We'd take a photo, scan it, and put it back up, and I would match. Oh, it was really, really hectic. But I would then match all the individual employees to their managers and then read it afterwards. The system worked for quite a long while. Embarrassingly so, actually, but it did work. So you can start with a piece of paper. You can start with Excel. We then got really clever and I put the scores on an Excel sheet. But as the company grew, you're saying that our staff are the most important and we want to support our staff, but you don't have the data to back why we need more money for training or why we want to launch new benefits or spend more money on our team. You need to have that data. So however you get the data, you need to have it. So for me, yes, it's a no-brainer. There is so many different softwares that are available, and I would definitely invest in software to be able to help you scale your business and do it in a really methodical and fair way for your staff. If you're going to be remunerating on performance, how are you measuring it? If your data is not accurate, that's really dangerous. So I really encourage people to find the right software for them. There's a lot available, and then decide the budget and who's going to be responsible for administrating that, because it does come down to resources there. And then keeping it really quite predictable for your staff so that they know what is coming, when it's coming, what they're expected to do. And that training can take a really long time. And those habits can take a long time. We've seen it. If we change one question, I've got to go out and train everybody again. So it does take a lot of effort, but it is worth it because it's your team. So of course it's worth it.
Yeah, I think that's also a really good point, is preparing the employees for it, because if you just sort of spring it on them, they're not going to think about it and, put thought to it and give you something back that's really useful. Thanks, everyone. So that's a wrap for part 1 of our conversation with Candice Seggie from Solar Africa. In the next episode, we'll dig even deeper, exploring how engagement, well-being, and performance all tie together. Candice will share how Solar Africa measures culture, supports mental health, and builds real belonging at work. So stay tuned for part 2 coming out next week. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe or follow us on LinkedIn for the latest news and updates. And remember, we always love getting feedback from our listeners. So drop us a DM or leave us a comment below. Looking forward to the next session.